Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and thank you very much for making some time to check today's video out. It's always much appreciated. Guys, today we're going to be talking about how to work Texas rig lures, Texas rig worms, Texas rig creature baits. I'm going to go over all the different type of actions that you can impart on these particular lure categories because depending upon the bait you're using, time of the year, the conditions, the structure, all that type of stuff requires a different type of action manipulation to generate strikes. So we're going to sort of give you guys a little seminar. I think you're going to come away with it with some really good information on this. Real quick, guys, just wanted to remind everybody, anyone out there interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, you can do that by going to my Facebook page, Randy Blockett Professional Angler, and just shoot me a private message there. And also, please take a second. If one of the good ways to support the channel, guys, is just go into the description on this video. Check out all the links I put in there. It's a bunch of different links of things you guys might be interested. It's all a good way to support the channel. So much appreciated. Okay, guys, primarily we're talking about, Texas rig worms, Texas rig creature baits, anything that you've got a slip sinker on it, because depending upon what you're fishing, it requires a different type of presentation there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through different scenarios here, different type of lures, and I'm going to show you how to work the bait as far as the action you want to manipulate on there. So anyway, first of all, let's talk about casting, because we got two different type of presentations. We're going to be talking about the flipping and pitching, or just the pitching, and then we're going to talk about just straight casting here. So let's go over, first of all, let's talk a little bit about casting like a Texas rig worm like that, different type of actions. So once you make the cast, guys, you're letting it hit the bottom there, and there's a couple different ways that you can work it based upon what you're trying to accomplish. Now, most people, when they work a worm, they just cast it out there, and you just see them just sort of, reeling like that, and they're just putting some action like that on there like that. And that's probably one of the most effective ways to work it. You can't really go wrong with that, just by keeping the worm contact with the bottom and giving a little bit of action like that. There's other times that different type of retrieves are going to generate the strike a little bit more. So let's talk a little bit about when you're fishing around, a little bit warmer conditions, specifically if you're fishing around some type of deeper structure like on points. One of the things I like to do is I'll throw it out there, let it hit the bottom, and then I'll take my slack up and I'll get the line tight, and then I'll pop it like that. I'll pop it like, a foot or two off the water, off the bottom, because that worm's going to dart up off of the bottom like that and come back down. And sometimes in that deeper, warmer water, when you pop that worm like that, it'll generate the strike. Now, I don't mean like pop it all the way back to the boat like that. I'm talking about you're working it just traditionally like that, and then just occasionally give it a quick pop, and then start working it a little bit more like that. Give it another quick pop like that. And usually what happens on it is when you pop it like that, as you pop it and you get to the upper end of the pop, that's when they bite it. They don't hardly ever bite it as the worm's falling down. And when you're fishing like that, try to use a little bit heavier sinker, because that reaction strike from the fast fall. Now, another time that I'm casting worms like that, say I'll make the cast out there, if I'm fishing like a real flat bottom, say like a flat gravelly point or a sandy type point, or just a flat, doesn't even have to be a point, where there's not much cover there, one of the things I like to do is I'll cast my worm out there, and then I'll just pull it like that all the way back. And then as I'm taking the slack up, I'm keeping a tight line, I'm reeling it up like that, and I'm just sweeping it back like that. So this worm, I'm pulling it across the bottom like that. And the advantage to that is when you're fishing those big flats out there and you're pulling it, see, I'm every time I pull it like that, I'm taking up like 5 or 6 feet of slack. I don't mean fish, pull it fast. I'm talking about just a gentle pull like that, making sure that you keep contact with the bottom. The advantage to that, it's almost like a combo Texas rig football head jig presentation. And when you do it like that, you can cover a lot of deep water in a hurry. If you're trying to cover flats or big flat points where there's a lot of area out there, you don't have time just to just keep it in one spot and doodle it around like that. You got to cover some water and trying to trigger those active fish. So that sweeping technique is going to be good. Now, the other time, the third way, as far as Texas rig and deeper waters, when you make your cast out there and you're working along the bottom and then you feel something. Let's say you feel a rock pile or a brush or something like that, a brush pile. Once you come in contact with that piece of cover, just shake your tip like that, and don't reel it in. Don't take up any slack. Just reel it, shake it in one spot like that. Maybe even put it in the hand like this, and you're just trying to get that worm to quiver a little bit like that. And try to keep it in contact with the cover as long as you can, because a lot of times that deeper cover is smaller. But if you can just keep it in one spot and just shake it like that, a lot of times they'll bite it. Also, if you're fishing heavy cover like that, and let's say you're working it through there and you feel a piece of cover, sometimes dead stick it. Don't even move it. Just leave your rod tip stationary like that. 15, 20 seconds if you can stand it a little bit, and then shake it a little bit, leave it still. And the only way that you can really do that effectively is if you know there's some cover down there, because that's usually when that dead sticking works a little bit better. Now the next presentation, let's talk about flipping and pitching, how to get the action on flip and pitching. It's a little bit different here, but it's still the same on Texas rig. So let's say, for example, you flip out there and the bait enters the water and your bait is over some type of object. There's two different type of flippings. One is when you're flipping around an object, and the other is when you're flipping into and over an object where your line is hanging vertical over something. There's two different ones. If you flip in there like you're flipping over a flooded bush, or you're flipping over a lay down tree, and your line is over something like that, once it gets to the bottom, guys, just shake it in one spot like that. Don't move it, don't reel it, just let it get to the bottom, shake it in one spot like that. Let it stop a little bit, shake it in one stop like that. Most of the time, if there's a fish there, they're gonna hit it within like the first five seconds or so. If you're confident that there's fish in there and your bait is hanging over something like that and you're shaking it like that, especially if you've been catching a few, that's another time the dead sticking can work really good. Just let it set in there a little bit, shake it a little bit like that, let it stop a little bit, can be really good with that. Another thing you can do with that is, let's say you flipped over a lay down tree or some type of a bush and you're shaking it on the bottom and you don't get a bite, just reel it up a crank or two off the bottom and then start shaking it like that, because the worm is going to be off the bottom, but it's still going to be in the cover, sort of shaken, just suspended a little bit like that. And sometimes you can get them with that. Now, if you're pitching and flipping, let's say you're pitching and flipping around an object like a edge of a stump or edge of a boat dock where you're not over something. A couple different things with that, depending upon the water clarity, water temperature, that type of stuff. Most of the time, you're going to do fine if you just cast it out there, you pitched out next to that stump or something like that, and you just start working it back to the boat. You know, just typical working just like that. That's going to work a lot of times. Other times, if you pitch it next to that stump or something like that, and especially if the water is a little bit on the clear side or if it's in the warm side, pitch it out there, and when you get it around that stump and you're shaking it, if you don't get a bite, pop it like that, just like you do in deep water. Just try to get that reaction strike. That's going to be another good way to do it. One other tip I'll give you guys, if you're fishing and pitching a jig, this is sort of off the subject a little bit, but always when you're pitching and flipping a jig in the cover like that, you always want to hop it hard like that. Don't work a jig like this. You need to pop it like that. You're going to get a lot more bites with it. But ultimately, guys, the thing about how you work a lure is you just sort of have to experiment, because a lot of times we don't know. It's like you can have a idea on how you need to retrieve a lure, but ultimately it's just figuring out what the bass want. And the way that you do that is it's really important to be able to get a few bites, to know that there's fish in an area. Because let's say you're fishing down a stretch of shoreline and you're not catching anything along that shoreline, it's very hard to experiment because you don't even know that there's fish there. But if you're confident, say you're working down a row of docks or flooded bushes or whatever, or flipping grass or anything like that, and you're getting a bite here or there, that's the time to experiment. If you're getting a few bites just working it traditionally like that, next thing you do, come back through that area and try dead sticking it or try hopping it hard off the bottom. You know, that's the way that you figure out exactly what the fish want and how they're going to get keyed into something like that. Like I said, sometimes they want it hopped, sometimes they want it hopped a little bit, sometimes they want it hopped hard, sometimes they want it dragged across the bottom. You know, that's just another reason bass fishing's so difficult, because you don't know what those dang fish want half the time. So Anyway, hope it helps out, guys, and thanks for tuning in. We'll talk later.